Okay, well, hello and welcome. This is the UCCS Speaker Series. I'm Richard Kravitz, Director of UC Center Sacramento. It's a pleasure, as always, to welcome you. Um, a few words about upcoming events. Of course, today is a health-related talk, and we have a number of others related to this theme in upcoming weeks. Next week, November 4th, climate modeling and risk assessment, part of our climate adaptation series from last season. The following Thursday, not Wednesday, but Thursday, November 12th, a special panel on cannabis and public health, new and persisting challenges for policymakers. November 18th, Wednesday, potential risk of exposure to the coronavirus among California workers, shedding some light on the hazards that are encountered by workers that we have deemed essential. And then finally, a more general talk the following week from former Assembly Speaker and current chair of the UC Board of Regents, John Perez. But for today, we are very pleased to welcome Atul Butte, who is the Priscilla Chan and Mark Zuckerberg Distinguished Professor of Pediatrics, Bioengineering, Therapeutic Sciences, Epidemiology, and Biostatistics at UCSF, and also director of the Bakar Computational Health Sciences Institute at UCSF. He also serves as chief data scientist for the entire UC system. He's an elected member of the National Academy of Medicine and was recognized by the Obama administration as a White House champion of change in open science for promoting science through publicly available data. Dr. Butte is founder of 3 companies, the inventor of 24 patents, and the author or co-author of over 200 scientific publications. He trained in computer science at Brown, worked as a software engineer at Apple and Microsoft, received his MD at Brown University, trained in pediatrics and pediatric endocrinology in Boston, and finally received his PhD from Harvard Medical School and MIT. And we're very pleased to welcome him today to speak with us about precisely practicing medicine from 700 trillion points of data. Dr. Butte.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's really great to finally be here. I know we tried to do this in March, and we had a Regents meeting that completely made everything topsy-turvy. Of course, COVID has made things even more topsy-turvy. So it's great to be here, at least virtually, speaking to you guys and this incredible audience here. So first, of course, I'm a medical doctor. You've heard my introduction. I have a few conflicts of interest. Suffice it to say, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't believe another word I said over the next 40 minutes. But I'm really proud of some of these, especially on the right side of the screen. All the companies started by my students. At a certain point, I tell my lab here at UCSF that if you want to change the world, you can't just keep writing papers about it. At a certain point, you need to really take what you know, take what you've discovered. If you really want to impact patients and families and doctors, sometimes it means taking that outside of the university and really taking it into industrial type of way. Of course, you got to do that safely, responsibly, and we'll talk about that. But I think data is the strongest way to empower entrepreneurs today to really create something new that's going to help patients and families. And we'll talk all about that today. So first of all, let me reintroduce the University of California to you. Of course, you all know what the University of California is, but here's my way of looking at this. The University of California is enormous, and with that enormity comes impact. Of course, we have 3 campuses and 3 national labs, one of which, Lawrence Livermore, I think has the largest supercomputer in the world right now, 200,000 employees and 250,000 students per year. And like most universities and companies, they're still trying to figure out what to do with all 200,000 employees and 250,000 students. And we're all trying our best right now. And then within the entire University of California, you have UC Health, which is the umbrella across all of our health professional schools and health systems. We have 20 health professional schools, 6 medical schools, but we also have pharmacy, nursing, dental, public health schools, schools of optometry, across the whole system. We train half the medical students and residents in California. So that means even if they don't stay with us, working with us after training, we do have some impact with the rest of the health system in California that way. about $2 billion in NIH funding, $13 billion seeing patients, 5,000 doctors get a paycheck every year from us, but 100,000 doctors write orders on our patients, for example, community doctors, 12,000 nurses. And we're not just random medical centers. UCSF and UCLA are in the US News top 10. Of course, we only mention that when we're in the top 10, otherwise that metric means nothing to us. And we have 5 NCI, National Cancer Institute Comprehensive Cancer Centers, and 5 Clinical and Translational Science Awards, meaning these are the best of the best in the United States. We have, and we have these secret, what I call superpowers. They're so secret sometimes we forget we have them in the University of California. IRB reliance, which means if a clinical trial gets approved to run to help patients in one campus, we can more or less automatically get that approval on the other campuses. So we can scale across our friendly campuses. Contracting works the same way, that if a contract is signed in Oakland at the Office of the President, we can scale that contract across all 10 campuses. So what I'm going to argue here, and at the beginning, is that I'm going to argue that nowhere else in the United States do 6 medical schools or 6 academic health centers work together like our 6 do. And to be really extreme about it, this would never happen in Boston, where there is good talent and great medical centers, but they all compete with each other. Whereas here, we're geographically apart that we don't have to compete with each other. We can really bring the strength of our synergy together here. And that's really what this whole talk is about. And with all this strength, 4 years ago now, the University of California announced publicly that we someday aspirationally will build a single accountable care organization, an ACO. What an ACO means is that instead of fee for service, which is still the majority of the US healthcare system, where we're paid to do something or to see patients, that someday we will create a single accountable care organization, which means we're paid per member per month. So there's a monthly charge that we get, and no matter what happens to those patients, that's the amount we're going to get paid. So that's the way the world is working. We can all argue about how fast that pace or transition is going to happen, but we want to start to build that. Now, it's a 10-year aspiration, so this isn't going to happen quickly in open enrollment, for example, but this was where we're going to get to. And we have to form new partnerships, for example, with the United Health Group here, to learn how to take on risk, to understand how to model patients and what could happen next financially to ourselves with them. But the minute you've made a business decision like this, like the University of California has, all of a sudden questions start to come up. What style of medicine are we going to practice? For example, UCLA might do something one way, UCSF does it another way. So which is going to be the right way to do it? And all of a sudden you realize it really helps to have a central database of all the ways we practice medicine to determine for ourselves what is the right way, what is going to be the right UC way to practice everything in medicine. And that's what we're talking about using data for. And the data I'm talking about specifically is electronic health record data. Now, you might not have directly seen an electronic health record. Maybe you've used some of the apps, and we'll talk about those. But your doctor, if you've ever seen a doctor in the last year or 2 or 10, you've probably seen them typing into a computer. So they're using the electronic health record system. And boy, are these systems expensive. So here are 3 press releases, just to kind of give you a sense as to how expensive these are. Sutter, of course, which is all up and down California, our neighbors here, spent $1 billion on their electronic health record system. Partners, which is the Massachusetts General Hospital and Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, started at $1.2 billion for their electronic health record system. And Kaiser Permanente spent $4 billion on their electronic health record system. Now, amazingly, they all bought the same system called Epic. So you can see the price tag ranges from $1 billion to $4 billion for these systems. Now, in some ways, I call this the most expensive data in America today, because we actually pay doctors to type stuff into these systems. But the whole point here is this, and if you don't walk away with anything, just remember this. It will be a national tragedy given how many hundreds of billions of dollars we've spent on these systems. It will be a national tragedy if we don't use this data to improve the United States healthcare system, right? We've spent hundreds of billions as a country on this. It will be a tragedy if we don't use this data to improve things. Of course, we have to do this safely, responsibly, and respectfully. But if we don't use all this data, what a tragedy this will be. Because hidden in here are all the gems as to what's working in medicine, what's not working, what might be excessive, and what are we missing, right? That's all captured in these systems today. That's what we're talking about using here. So to make it really obvious, here at the bottom are the six UC health systems, each of their little cylinders here, and they keep all their data, of course, but then on a monthly basis, and we'll talk about daily in a moment, on a monthly basis, we get a transfer of that data centrally in the University of California Health Data Warehouse at the top here. Now, looking at the six at the bottom here, you have UCSF, UCLA, Irvine, San Diego, and Davis, which are enormous medical systems. We'll talk about them primarily. And then UC Riverside is brand new, right? Their medical school is a couple of years old. They don't have a hospital system there yet, but we're going to show them here. We distinguish those patients, but they have several thousand patients. The rest of these have millions of patients, but we're going to still have Riverside on there too. So sometimes they want to switch gears between 5 and 6, but we still love and respect Riverside. Don't ever forget that. So here's where we are roughly. And I'm showing you raw data. I'm not dumbing any of this down for the public here, okay? This is what we look at constantly. Now, the top line number we all love to know and tout is that the University of California has treated 15 million patients in the last 15 years. We love that number because it's a nice round number, and it's 5% of the entire United States population, right? That's how impactful UC is. We treated 5% of the entire United States population in the last 15 years. But we haven't had Epic as our electronic health record system that long. So if we count from the modern day, let's say when we installed Epic at UCLA and UCSF, that was in 2012. So moving forward from there, it's about 6 million patients that we've seen with what we'll say is modern data. It's about 250 million encounters, 100 million or so procedures, 600 million medication orders, 640 million diagnosis codes. You get the sense of how big this is, 2.3 billion blood tests and vital signs. So it's every heart rate, every respiratory rate, all the pain scores. What I like to say is everything from Tylenol to CAR T cells. That tells you the bookends of what's the cheapest thing we probably do. We give out Tylenol pills. To CAR T cells is probably the most expensive thing we do, programming your own immune cells to fight your own cancer. Right? So we got everything from the simplest, the most complicated thing in this database here. We also have it mixed in there, OSHPD, which is the state regulatory data, pathology and radiology text elements. So we need to know, so cancer, is it malignancy, what stage, what grade of cancer sometimes, and also all the patients that die in California, because we need to keep track of that, because that's going to be the ultimate outcome. Obviously, we're trying to avoid that when we can. So what can we learn about what we should be practicing more of to avoid deaths, for example? We have some self-funded plans, which I'll talk about, quality of performance dashboards. I'll show you a few of those. But all of this is about safe, responsible, respectful use of the data. Okay, and I'm sure we're going to get questions on that. First, before I show you what we're doing with this data, I am really proud to show what the entire University of California is doing with patients, for patients. All 5 University of California health systems, and Riverside, I think, is on there too now, but the 5 major academic medical centers provide your own health data to you as a patient through what's called FHIR. It's a federal interchange standard. And one way to see that is if you happen to have an iPhone, the Apple Health app, you can click and get your own health data. In fact, if you're seen at multiple UC campuses, all of the UC data comes as one big stream in that app. Now, of course, we know not everyone has an iPhone. We know Google and Android phones are there, and there are more of those than iPhones. But instead of waiting for the equivalent of this health record to show up on Google Android, we are working with Google, that's UCSF folks, to help build the programming for it. So we are not content to wait for Android users and Android to catch up. We are going to help actually write the code for that. So I'm really proud of that. This is what really comes down to. Patients should be empowered with their own health data. And constantly we're pushing the edge of this. For example, UCSD San Diego was one of the launch partners with Apple, showing how patients can benefit from this. I still believe not enough patients realize all of their data is available for them through these kinds of apps. And it's beautiful how you can see your own records. We want you to be empowered by that data. But of course, we're doing things with this data too. And really, the majority of these uses so far are what we call quality improvement and operational use. So we have central tools to improve the quality of care. We're decreasing expenses in our own health plan bill because we pay for our own health care for our own employees and families. We're managing those costs to make sure we're not wasting our own money for healthcare. And we're centrally managing primary care patients. I'm going to show you a dashboard on that in a moment. Here's one example of strength in numbers here. So Janet Napolitano, the outgoing president of the University of California in 2017, announced that all 5 UC cancer centers were going to start to work together with each other. And what it means is this really actually makes an impact for clinical trials. So clinical trials are research projects, right? They're often sponsored by pharmaceutical companies or biotech companies, but clinical trials are how those life-saving drugs and therapies are going to reach patients, right? If we, as the University of California, want to get those drugs to our patients, we need to enroll them in clinical trials. And so what we're showing here is we can now start to work together. Instead of separate campuses, all of us work together to join clinical trials. And here, for example, are the 161,000 cancer center patients we saw in 2019 across the entire University of California health system. Of course, we take care of all races, ages, genders, ethnicity, sexual preferences. Diversity is across the state of California. And you can see all the locations there. You can see there's a blob in Las Vegas because, of course, if patients get sick in Las Vegas, they come to us. But the diversity is here. The Hawaiian Islands are covered with our colors, for example. And this means now we can represent all of this diversity in California to pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies to get our patients those life-saving drugs. We're now also starting to get genetic testing on those cancers. And you can see this is, of course, applied to all patients, especially the more severe cancers and the more life-threatening cancers. But now we have a single database of those cancer reports. It's growing, it's improving. But that means now a cutting-edge cancer oncologist at UCLA might see a gene mutation in their patient's cancer that a UCSF doctor saw last year. And all of a sudden now we can start to make the connection between those 2 cancer centers to see what was that patient treated with last year, so we can help this year's patient with the same mutation. And it also means that we can start to use cancer genetics to help get all of our patients in clinical trials again to get them those life-saving drugs here. We're also using dashboards to help take care of primary care patients. Of course, we take care of tertiary, quaternary care patients at the University of California, but of course we take care of primary care as well. And so here's one dashboard we use constantly to take care of our primary care patients with type 2 diabetes. And now you can see on the right here, there are just shy of 44,000 of these patients we take care of type 2 diabetes. The vast majority, so this is updated monthly, a single dashboard has all 5 campuses here. You can see the vast majority are taken care of a primary care physician or PCP, but also some of our specialists, our endocrinologists take care of them as well. On one dashboard, we see the latest A1C, that's the hemoglobin A1C, the test we use to follow patients with diabetes. And is it increasing or decreasing? As you all know, during this pandemic, we're not all walking around as much as we used to. We're not leaving the house as much as we used to. And so we can start to see that in some patients, this is increasing. And at the bottom, centrally now, we can track all the diabetes care and all that care elements, eye health, kidney health, all of that, and we can compare it with national benchmarks. Now, to go beyond that, we're starting to use, obviously taking care of patients goes beyond just prescribing a drug. We're starting to really start to identify other elements that affect our patients. And the term for this is called social determinants of health. And one way we're using an estimate, one way to get to this is we're using an estimate called the Area Deprivation Index, or ADI. So what that is every region in the United States uses census data. Of course, all of you fill out your census. This is why it's important. And then from that, we can estimate each region's income level, education, employment, housing quality at the 9-digit zip code level. And then we can use that with race, ethnicity, gender, and age to identify health disparities. Because identification is the first step to isolation and then to really improvement, right? We want to go from identification to improvement of care, but targeting that care specifically. The phrase for this is precision public health. So now centrally we can geocode patients and start to plot that out. So this is what the map of California looks like. And as we all know, the rural areas are a little bit more challenging regions compared to the coasts. And this is what it actually looks like for our 6 regions. On the top left, you have the region around UCSF, and you can see the coastal area, and you know this is a wealthier area, but also there are significant areas there that are going to be more challenging neighborhoods. Sacramento on the right with a little bit more rural nature there. Then Los Angeles and Orange County on the bottom left. So UCLA and UC Irvine, and you can see the patchwork there. And then San Diego and Riverside on the bottom right. And these are all equal sized in terms of square miles regions here. So the University of California treats all of these. I'm going to argue we treat the richest and poorest zip codes of the entire United States in our patient population. Now, what we've been able to do, and I think that we're probably the first in the country to be able to do this, is that we've discovered that even despite the differences in age, sex, race, and ethnicity, the area that you live in, the neighborhood you live in, still actually affects how you do with diabetes. And so here are the 33,000 patients we can figure out where you live and your area deprivation. 1 on the left is the most beneficial neighborhoods. 10 on the right is the most challenging neighborhoods. And you can see that line shows almost half a point difference in your hemoglobin A1C, even controlling for age, sex, race, and ethnicity. Now, there's a lot of statistics here, but what this means is just moving from a challenging neighborhood to a less challenging neighborhood can be the same as starting a new drug for diabetes. It's amazing how impactful that difference is. Now, this is going to help us deliver targeted treatments. What is the neighborhood that we should be creating and deploying, for example, a diabetes bus or a cancer bus or colonoscopy bus? We have these kinds of services at UCSF that go around the city of San Francisco in an effort called SF-CAN, trying to improve cancer screening. But if we had to do this statewide, how would we do this? Where exactly would we park the bus? Who's missing the appointments? Is it because they can't get to public transit? All of these are even more challenging with the pandemic now. But this is what we can do centrally now with this data to deliver targeted therapies. And it doesn't mean just giving more prescriptions, right? Is there a housing issue? Does a grocery store need to be advocated for? All of those as well. Let's stick with diabetes and go even further. Now, let's talk about the drug therapy for diabetes. And this is important because it's complicated which drugs we can choose to treat type 2 diabetes. Now, this is a little bit old, but this is what the American Diabetes Association says doctors should do for type 2 diabetes. And the way to read this is to start at the top and go to the bottom. Now, just to be clear for a moment, this is one of the lucky diseases that we have a diagram, that we have experts around the country telling doctors how to practice medicine here. There are many conditions like autism, lots of cancers where we don't even have a diagram like this. The way to read this is start at the top. So when a patient gets diagnosed with diabetes, you try to improve what they're eating, weight control, improve their exercise. And then if that fails, you move to metformin. And if that fails, you move to one of 6 choices in the middle there. You can see the 6 different colors. Now they're all equal size colors there, right? Equal size the shapes there and colors. And then if those fail, you move to another color, right? You can see the colors getting mixed at the middle there. And then when everything fails, you move to metformin and insulin at the bottom there. Do you see that? So the way to use this is really a patient starts at the top and then they start to fall through this figure heading towards the bottom there. Now we start to ask an important question. Of all those 6 boxes in the middle, which ones do our doctors choose? Because it makes a world of a difference. For example, some of those boxes in the middle are 200 times more expensive than some of the boxes on the edges there, the yellow box, for example. But they're all the same size and they're all the same pastel color. It's not really clear which one the doctor should choose there. So we wanted to ask a very simple question. At UCSF, which ones do our doctors choose? And so we start to make a diagram for that. And so here we used to call these diabetes donuts. Then we realized donuts are inappropriate for diabetes. So we call these lifesaver plots now. And the way to read this, it's UCSF, 26,822 patients we've started on a drug for diabetes. And you can see a big chunk of yellow there. That means they started on metformin. That's good. That's what the figure said to do. We have a whole bunch of patients starting on insulin there. Okay, that's interesting. And then we have all these other colors. And all the other colors are different drugs or even combinations of drugs that patients are starting on. And this work by Tom Peterson, so I'm giving credit at the bottom there. Now, what happens is we start a patient on a drug, and some of you might have started on a drug before for any condition, and we send you home. We maybe get some blood tests, and we say, come back in 90 days. Let's see how you're doing. And then we make another decision. What's the next thing we're going to do with this drug? So here's the next decision point, right? The second ring. Now, the way to read this is the yellow is still metformin, but if it's going from yellow to yellow, those patients are still on metformin. We had to change the dose maybe. And all the other colors mean that the patient switched a drug, added a drug, subtracted a drug. And if there's white, that means that patient is happy on that drug. They've never changed again. We send you home. Why don't you come back in 3 months? Here's the next choice for your drug. We send you home, come back in 3 months, and here is the fourth choice. So just thinking 4 steps out, we can start to think about how medicine is practiced here. And if you count all the different spokes in this figure, there are 1,500 ways to start patients on diabetes drugs at UCSF. Probably too many. Which one of these, which strategies are the best ways to start patients on diabetes drugs? Maybe we can start to use data to help figure that out. Now, of course, I'm showing you UCSF here, and here now are all the patients in the entire University of California health system. Almost 750,000 medication orders and prescriptions here, covering 160,000 patients. And if you count up all the spokes here, we have more than 5,000 ways to do it in just the first 4 moves of this kind of strategy here. Which are the first 4 different drugs we're choosing here? Probably too many. And from all of this, we hope to find a good single, maybe it's not just one way to do it, a good strategy for the UC way to practice medicine. I know, for example, that all of those experts have told the American Diabetes Association one way to do it, but maybe with all of our data, we can practice a UC way to do it because we've had so much experience practicing medicine in this way. So now, I'm going to skip some of this. We'll come back to this with questions here. We can even start to put a little bit of crude machine learning and AI in here, right? That's what I was going to show in those slides. Artificial intelligence on data starting to figure out the moves for us here. So this is a real raw data. You remember all those patients that start on metformin, and we can even use a simple decision tree on the right there. If your hemoglobin A1C, that's that blood test again, was ever more than 8.8, you go into that red square. Or if your fasting blood sugar, that's how we diagnose diabetes, was ever more than 206, you also go to the red square, otherwise you go to the green square. If you're in that red square, what this is telling us, what it's going to tell you someday, is don't even bother starting the metformin. I know what the American Diabetes Association says, but in 150,000 patients in the University of California, we know it doesn't work. Whatever was the next thing we were going to do, let's do that now. Let's do that first. Let's make that move faster to get patients to therapy sooner. So what this is going to end up being is data-driven medicine, not just expert-driven medicine, because sitting in all this data are all the right moves that our docs can make. Now, this is all aspirational. We're going to get there, but we got the talent at UC, and we're going to get more of that talent to really help us use this data safely and respectfully to really improve patient care. This is what we're talking about here. And of course, we got to study the drugs themselves. And I'm not going to go through all these details here, but we're starting to look because we've got so many years of data. Do those drugs that cost 100 or 200 times more give us any benefit? Do they give patients any benefit? Right? 5, 6, 7 years out, is your heart better? Are your kidneys better? Are your eyes better? We're going to start to do the comparative effectiveness studies that I'm going to argue no one else in the country can do. And then we will finally get to real answers. Does that expensive drug actually do anything more for patients, right? And I think it's our duty as the University of California to lead the country on this because we have this data. We can ask the questions that no one else can really ask in the country here. All right, let's switch in the last few minutes to COVID. Now, we were happy getting all this data centrally monthly, and then COVID hit. And now we've switched to daily. So we get all of this data daily on COVID. It runs actually at midnight. And I'm showing you data from last night at midnight. Okay, so as the team knows here, I've updated all of these slides right before coming on. And almost 500 people in the country, 500 teams across the country get these emails every morning, including the White House Operations Center, if they're still actually doing things over there, the CDC, and the Food and Drug Administration, as well as California, our Department of Health and Human Services, Cal Medical Association, Cal Hospital Association, Department of Public Health as well. So the way to read this here is how many tests we've been running on our campuses on our patients. Of course, our hospitals have been running tens of thousands of tests weekly for many other hospitals and other regions. I'm not counting those here. I'm only counting the ones we run on our patients every single day. And on the right there, you can see nearly 50 different ways we have of ordering a COVID PCR test in the University of California, right? It depends. We can send them out. We run many of these ourselves. All of these test results are harmonized every single morning, starting at 6 in the morning when we get the data till about 9 in the morning. So all of these, constantly adding new tests and ways to test for COVID in California, in the University of California. And these are pending results that we've delivered to patients. So on the right there, you can see we have delivered results to 318,000 patients in the University of California, of which 10,678 were told they got a positive result. And the last 7 days, we have a positive rate of 1.87%. So that's actually lower than it used to be, but it's also creeping back up, as some of you might have seen in the press. You can see it's been down from early in July, and these are the campus colors. So UC Irvine and Orange County still are higher than the other campuses. We can see where folks are living and where the blips are happening all across the state of California. And we can see the ages, sex, and locations at the bottom there. And then these are the fewer that get admitted as inpatients. You can see right away, we have jumped to 116 inpatients that were seen yesterday. So they were in the hospital. That's down from a low around the 80s, even just a week ago. So we're in the middle of a blip up right now. So we're keeping a very close eye on this. We can count constantly how many patients are in the ICU, how many are on ventilators, and extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, or ECMO. That is the most intensive thing we can do on patients. You can see all of those there. And you can see we have sent home 1,819 patients, 234 have passed away so far. And these are the latest results. And so you can see all the percentages there. About 3.3% of those tested have been positive to date, but it's lower in the last 7 days. So because it was much higher in July, 25% roughly of all of our patients that were positive have been admitted, and about 8.5% of those that were admitted have passed away, or about 2.2% of our positives. So that's a crude case fatality rate. It's extremely crude, but of our positives, 2.18% of them have passed away. So this is still a serious disorder, having COVID here. Now we can go further than that. We've been showing all of this data with the Food and Drug Administration. I'm super proud that we talk with the Food and Drug Administration almost every other day, because as you know, they're rapidly accepting and approving diagnostics and therapeutics, but then they want to see, are they actually working? And so we constantly are feeding back data to the FDA, where are drugs being used, are they really being used, and what the outcomes might be. So for example, here's what we call a calendar plot for remdesivir, as you know, has been approved. And so you can see how many patients in the UC system are getting prescribed remdesivir. We had a big blip in July and August, and it started to drop off in September, a little bit more use at the end of September, and it's been calmer in October. So there are patients being admitted. So far, they haven't been as intense as needing remdesivir. And we can also keep track of race, ethnicity, and sex for all of those patients, as well as track race, ethnicity, sex for everything that we're doing here on COVID. So what did we learn? We learned a lot of lessons, but here are just a few of them. The public needs to see our data. The public wants to see our data. We tweet out these dashboards on Twitter every single workday. And as you can see at the top there, nearly 2 million impressions for these tweets. That's how many people see the University of California Health System tweets on these numbers. Because I think if you don't have a family member or a friend affected with COVID, it's still an invisible disease for most people, right? They don't see lines out, they see the rules, they see the laws, they see all these restrictions. So we're making sure the public can see this is real. These are our raw numbers here. I think it really helps communicate, are things getting better or worse? So no matter what, we're going to keep putting these numbers out there as long as we can to make sure the public sees that we are taking care of these patients here. And all of this in the end is really help UC researchers to go beyond, right? There's only so much a central team can do. Machine learning, AI, data analytics in a safe, respectful, responsible, equitable, fair way in medicine, okay? To make sure this is not just AI, machine learning, data analytics for patients that can afford to pay for it. This is for all the patients at the University of California, and then really helping teach the whole country how to do this right with their own patients as well, to help scale so University of California can help lead the country in this way. Incredible team that helps me do all of this work, that helps all of us do all this work, and a lot of funding, generous donations, and incredible support in the University of California. I'm just a shout out to Carrie Byington, who's the Executive Vice President of UC Health, and really keeps all of this work supported to make sure we can do a lot of good centrally from the Office of the President. So I think I've left some time for questions there, and I'm just going to stop there. Thank you.